With the seat mounts done, it's time to start getting these amplifiers installed. For our highs amplifier, we're going to be running the Audio Control D4800. Let's take a closer look at this amplifier. This is a 4-channel DSP amplifier. It's 125 watts by 4 at 4 ohms or 200 watts by 4 at 2 ohms. On the top of the amplifier, your power, protect, and communication light. When this is plugged into a laptop, Windows or Mac, or an iPad if you add the Bluetooth dongle, this light will blink blue. GTO sense on and off. We were hooking this up to a factory radio. GTO will look at the DC offset and turn the amplifier on and off. Maximized input lights, maximized output lights. This will tell us when it's clipping on the input. This will tell us when we're getting distortion on input and output when setting the gains, but the gains are done through the software. As well as your milk light, which is for source level clipping. Across the top, there are tons of indicators for if the signal is doing anything and we might want to adjust our levels. Looking at the side of the amplifier, it has two 40 amp fuses, an input for 4 gauge, front and rear RCA inputs, along with a subwoofer output. This is a 6-channel DSP. Even though it's a 4-channel amplifier, it is designed for this application where you'll be taking this as the main input and going off to a sub amp. You can EQ and time delay through this output. Option port here is for the optional Bluetooth dongle. You can use this as a standalone amplifier if you want. It'll do dual Bluetooth, meaning there's one Bluetooth for audio and one Bluetooth for tuning the amplifier. There's 3 inputs, and the reason for that is this amplifier has a very unique feature in that there's 2 inputs for the front channels. This allows you to do summing on the front channels. An example of that would be if you're doing a car that has an active front stage. You could run the high input here, such as the tweeter mid-range combination, and then the mid bass here. Then in the software, you can blend and level adjust those two together. You also have the rear input. It uses the ACR3 volume knob. One of the questions we get a lot is which volume knob should we use, the one here or the one on the amplifier. The ACR3 gives you an option in that this has 4 presets that you can set up through the DSP. You can toggle through them with that particular bass knob. Or if you have the Bluetooth dongle, there is an app you can download on your phone and do the same features that the ACR3 does on your phone. Your output here are removable Phoenix connectors that come off of the amplifier. On our amp board, the way we've designed this inset here is the point we want the fins of this amplifier to attach to. We want to make sure it's centered here with left and right, and then the heatsink rests up against this lip towards the back. 4 screws to hold it in place, and then this front area here is going to be for our wiring. The power wire is going to come out and go down this side here because this amplifier is going on the driver's side of the car. The RCAs are going to come across and go up the center console into the back of the radio along with the speaker wires. The sub RCA is going to come across, go through the center console and over to the sub amp. Let's get started. In preparation for wiring up the amplifier, I've prepared the wiring that we're going to be using on this. We like to cover our wire in a flexible braided loom. We use ferrules on the end, and we use our branded logo heat shrink. Ground is black. On our positive, we have a red piece of heat shrink. We're using speed wire to connect this up into the dash. Speed wire is a 9-conductor wire, 9 conductors. There's 8 speaker wires and then a 9th remote turn on, a blue wire. We've wired in a second blue wire. This is going to run off to the sub amp underneath the other seat. Prepped our 4000 series Stinger RCAs. We use heat shrink to denote what each is for: green, purple, a white, a gray, and those are telling us what corners of the car they're going to work on. They also match up to the same colors on the speed wire. White is driver's front, gray is passenger front, green is driver's rear, and purple is passenger rear. When attaching all your wiring, I like to break them into segments. I also like to think of them in layers. Power is going to have to come this way. We want to get our signal wires and speaker wires in place first, so we'll start there. Farthest corner out is going to be our speaker. That's going to be this harness. The Phoenix plugs, as I showed, do unplug. Start with the rear, front is on top. I want to keep this in as tight to the amplifier as possible. For that, I'm going to drill my holes along here. I'll use our clean wire ruler that you can pick up at Mobile Solutions to prep up our holes, I'll line up where I want my first hole to be, check to make sure all our holes will line up where we want them. In this case, if our hole falls in line with the logo, if you want to make sure the logo is clean, don't put a zip tie there, otherwise you're good. Right about there looks perfect. Push this up against the amplifier like so. We're gonna be using 4-inch zip ties. That means I need a 9 64th drill bit, which is this right here. I want my holes as close to this amplifier as possible. The ruler was designed to allow us to get them as close as we can because of the fact that we still need plastic there. I want to go a little bit closer than that. For that, I'm going to pull this out like this, giving me 1/8 of an inch between the amplifier and the ruler. I'm going to drill my holes. Those first holes drilled, I can go back and use those as a guide to drill my other. When threading the zip ties through, they have an end, they have a length. I want this head to be at this back hole. I'm gonna come up through this hole in the front. That'll allow me to wrap it around and put this head here at the back hole. The reason for doing that is so that as I move out this way, these holes where I might need to run another zip tie through won't be plugged by the head. This is what we end up with, nice and tight against the amplifier. That moves us to the next portion, which is gonna be our bass knob, high level, or RCAs, or all of them. Because you could run high level into this and an RC out to your sub amp. You could also be using this bass knob. For this, we're just gonna be using the RCAs here, and we have them all prepped and ready to go. These are directional RCAs. Stinger does do a nice job of putting little flags on the end. The 4-channel that have the heat shrink on, we wanna make sure these white flags go towards the radio. The one that's gonna be going over to the sub, we wanna make sure that the flag is here at the amplifier, because for that one, this is the source unit. When plugging in RCAs, they have a tendency to want to twist. Try to flatten them out as much as possible by running your fingers along them and then plugging them in. Making sure that the RCAs are nice and straight, we're going to move them and run them in parallel with this wire here. Inside the car, they're gonna go up through the center console and the hump this way. RCAs are nice because you can easily stack them on top of one another. What I need to do is figure out how far over I need to make my first hole. I'll mark it. Can use my ruler to drill the rest of those holes so that they're the same hole pattern. And that's the look I was going for with the RCAs. These 2 wires are going to head up into the center console. This is my RCA with remote turn on wire for the sub amp. That leaves us with the last 2 wires on here, which are my power and ground. These 2 wires just need to come out straight. There is a hole from the factory located right here, so they'll turn once they get here and run up over into the engine bay. Putting my wire ruler underneath power wire, I can position it where I need it to be. Using these hole patterns, I want the wire to come in on the amp board right about here. That way it clears all of these. I'm gonna flip the wire ruler to the other side where my holes are tighter together. And now I can get 3 holes. I really want my power wire to stay nice and tight into this. That gives me my first holes. Move the wire ruler over. Second holes, there is a gap between the 2 for where the remote turn on would normally go. I'm gonna retain that gap. To do that, I'm just gonna line my ruler up on the holes here. Move it over the same distance that I have here. Add in my zip ties. That brings us to the final conclusion on this amp rack. Let's take a closer look. As you can see, the power wire clears the RCAs and speaker wire. Taking a closer look at the back side, you can see how all the zip ties go in the same direction. This is what I was talking about earlier. If we needed to keep drilling holes this way, the ends would fill in the previous holes and leave the next hole open, just like it's doing here. And now for the fun part, getting it into the car and starting to get those wires across. I'm gonna do that first before I start on the second amplifier. Let's take a closer look now that the amplifier is in the car. One of the questions we get asked a lot is, when mounting an amp like this, where do you ground it? A lot of the times there is a factory ground point somewhere in this area, and in this case there's one right here. There's a factory ground attached to it. It's a big 10mm bolt. Easy enough. Pull the bolt out, put our new ground in place. Amplifier's grounded. Power wire runs up along the side here and is waiting right in this area here for Fernando to get into the firewall and make his fuse holder mount. Hold the center console out. Our wire runs up in through here, comes up through the dash and is chilling out right here. Back into the center console. This is the wire that is going to run underneath that seat, so that's our RCA and remote turn on. I haven't ran that over yet. I'm going to wait until we get this portion of it. With that being said, it is time to grab the second amplifier. I'll meet you over there and we'll talk about how we're going to wire that up.